Now for personas. Personas is quite a wide concept. I think that most of you, who heard about personas? Anything about personas? Raise your hand, please. Okay, and now from those who raised the hand, who thinks that personas only user personas? I think, okay, do you know any other personas than user personas? If you know other personas, can you raise your hand? Excellent, so you learn more today. So personas are the archetypes. So you can see this wizard here, and by his appearance, immediately you can recognize something triggers in your head, maybe, if you read books when you was a child, at least. There's like this guy, creator, he has this, like, drawing something, and immediately your brain recognizes, has some patterns inside, how this person behaves, what this person thinks, and personas are actually archetypes. I have composed the definition for you that represents portion of your audience, not all of them, only some real-world people, and as every model, it tries to simplify the reality. So personas is the approach to simplify the reality so that you can manage that, and any other business analysis model is actually trying to do the same. They're trying to simplify the reality so that you can use it. And they should be significant for your context and for whom solution that you're working on or thinking about brings some value. So do you use any personas in your work? Like you really have them in your discussions, you may be right to describe them. Can you raise the hand? Maybe 5%. Okay, then excellent. I think there's a great opportunity here. If we look into business analysis body of knowledge, for example, there are different types of stakeholders that we work for. And personas could be used for our customers or end users, which may be different people. There are people making decisions, and there are people actually using the product. There are people representing end users, there are people just paying for that. If you're just downloading the application for your phone, it's all combined in you, but the larger the solution is, maybe there's a company or enterprise, or some product company, the more you will have this split. It could be used for regulators and for people who implement the solutions, and we will explore this today. And the last thing for context, we're not there yet, is the personas could be used for two different, I would call this perspectives. One is focused on the outcomes, what you want to achieve in the end, and the other is focused on process. What is happening as a set of steps, and what's important in the set of steps to achieve the end result. This represents the user that I think most of the audience has in your work or specifications or requirements. It's called elastic user, and it's something that happens over time. So you define someone who you think will be the user for your product or solution. So he looks like normal. And then after a month, something changed, maybe on the market, maybe in your head, in your team, and you think, oh, our users will handle this, and like the hand moves there. And then over the next few months, you think, oh, and now we have this different requirement, and a different system, and we have different inputs, and suddenly the other hand moves to a different direction. And over time, you don't notice that, but your user looks like this, and you try to please everybody, and this is the most common mistake. You can't please everybody. If you will actually narrow down the people that you want your solution or product to be valuable to, then you will be more successful. For example, I can sell air to you. You will not buy it from me, but I can sell it to divers, and they will buy it from me for a high price. So we want to avoid that. Now, this was all the context for what we'll be heading at. It will be a packed presentation. So we'll talk about user personas, more about buyer personas, just a little bit about other types of personas, and what are the best practices that how you can use that. Let's start from the user personas. Anybody recognizes this man? Raise your hand if yes. So he's called Alan Cooper, and he's actually considered to be the father of personas approach, but specifically for user personas approach. He was doing that many years ago. So he was once walking and talking to himself, trying to build a solution IT solution at that time, which is kind of cool. And he was talking to himself, and he imagined a person called Kathy, and he used that person to build internal dialogues, how he will build the solution. A little bit later, he used this at 3 different persons for a commercial engagement that he had to really try to convince the board that you need to build a solution in this way, because these are the 3 key persons that will be using. They represent real world. And this was actually really successful for him. He was able to build a solution, and the solution was really successful on large market. And after that, he published a book. This book, if you want to read more about user personas, you have to check it, which is actually explaining this approach of using personas, and he's doing this for many years by now, and he proven that this is a very successful approach. And times have changed for the last 20 years. Of course, we have more enterprises, and he was more focused on explaining this to a smaller companies, but now at the scale that we have now, this still works. It's just a little bit different approach that you really need to understand your audience, and would you like to use the user personas for a product that is being built for mass market, or a solution that is being built for some specific company. So to really create personas, you will have to be the scat, you will have to explore, you have to dig the data. You don't have to write the personas from your head, you really have to research. And how to do that? You can run different surveys, you can ask your existing clients, you can ask potential clients, you can ask your group of stakeholders how to do that. You can run interviews with them, or you can run interviews with people who represent them if you don't have access to them. It's better than nothing, but never act on your assumptions. So it's definitely better to talk to someone who is a proxy for a persona. Even better to talk to as many people as possible, and by that I mean hundreds of people. If you're just spending maybe 5 minutes of your time per day for that, over time you will accumulate the data. And this is really key. You need to fill this jar, this persona, only with real data. The most common mistake that people do when using personas, any type of personas, they fill them with imaginary data, with data that you gathered your team or your group of people, and you start thinking, oh, we all think that our users are like that, maybe people making decisions are like that, and that's a mistake. You really need to research. Now, what is the content for a user persona profile? It's not the sections of the user persona, but what you want to achieve. So you want to achieve empathy with your users. You want to read the persona profile, and you want to feel like that person. So it needs to look realistic. You want to use this for making better decisions for you and your team, and the content inside, it should describe the needs that those people have, their motivation, how they behave, and it doesn't need, it's a mistake to represent just an average user. It should be a specific set of end users that you're trying to reach, and your persona should feel real. And remember this definition from the beginning, it should represent only portion of your target audience, not all of them. And the sections inside the user persona profile are quite simple. You start with the whole description and finish with the name only in the end. So don't start with the name, but the name is really important when you consume and read that. And the name should have some meaning, like you need to use your fantasy to pick up the name that calls some emotions from you, your team, or anyone working with that. You may add a quote, which is what this person may be typically saying. This also helps. The section for more details, you may include the age and gender if this matters for your product, but it doesn't really have to be in your persona profile. You can add more demographics, like what's the job of that person, and many other things like the income, only if this matters for your solution or product. And then the main part is the goals that this persona has, her motivation or his motivation, pain points. What are the pain points that that person is experiencing daily? and in the end, behavior patterns. You decide what to add. It's like an instrument that you can use to your advantage, but it should really represent the needs that your persona has. How it may look like, just an example. So this is Sarah, meet Sarah. She has this characteristic, I like this one. She plans just a little bit and everything else goes with the flow. For example, here, you may specify more details, like here you can just check the age, what's important, and she wants to become a fashion designer, and this describes her personality. And the other part of her profile is her life journey. So how she started, where she went. Again, you don't have to follow this. It's just one of the examples to use your fantasy how the user persona profile will look like. So this is how she ended up, and this is her behaviors, where she spends time, what's important for her, and based on that, some decisions will be made for building a solution, a product. This is the John, different persona, and as you can see, he plans more, has like different set of those characteristics that we decided would be important for our solution or product. He has different set of behaviors, different life journey, and if we will define several of these personas, we will be able to use them for building our solution or product. But you always need to check that you're not building a monster. You're building something that looks real, feels like a real person. So just make sure that you avoid building a user persona which is it's not elastic. It's kind of a real person and doesn't really contain everything you want to pack into that. How to use this for BAs? They may be used for many different ways, but I just try to highlight what's really important for BAs. So it's used in communications. We use this for talking to your team, testers, developers, architects, user experience engineers, anyone inside the team, to replace the communication that typically happens. We'll think this will be good for our users without specifying which specific user. So you use John and Sarah instead. I think John will like this. Or I think Sarah will not like this change that we are making here. And you will notice that over time, the product that you are building, the discussions, they change. People start using those names, and if those names are based on real data, this helps with building the right solution. You can use this in designing the user stories if you are using the agile approach. You can use this for use cases, and also important part that you can use it for no decisions. You know that the really important decisions for business analysts is saying no. It's the same for product manager at the right time, for avoiding scope creep, avoiding building the unnecessary functionality. So you can use personas to tell your business, your stakeholders, or your team, depending on the situation, that we will not build this part. Or finding some gaps. So if you do all of that, you'll be a fantastic, very successful business analyst. So try to employ just a few points from here. It will be really beneficial for your solution or product. Now for buyer personas. Buyer personas is a different, completely different perspective. So users are using a product, but someone is making a decision. Someone is deciding, should I buy that? Should I pay for that? Maybe, is your solution GDPR compliant? Someone decides on that. Is your solution really good for my department? Should I buy it? When you purchase the application, your phone, you are buyer persona, you are end user, your user persona, all at once. But the larger the solution is, the more you will have this in place. And there are three types of buyer personas, or three types of buyers. One is economic. It's someone who pays money and decides if it fits my budget, is it expensive, not expensive, do I see the value for paying enough amount of money so that you have the purchase done. Then there are technical buyers, and technical buyers, they have the checklist. Is it GDPR compliant? Okay, yes. Is it like this standard? Okay, yes. Okay, then we can have a discussion with you, would we buy your product? And the third one is functional. It is mostly covered by user personas, But if you have a situation when someone represents a group of users, it may be a head of department, it may be someone who decides to buy a solution to a large group of people but will be not using that, some director, then you will have this different type. And we need to build our solution to users but speak to buyers, and this impacts the functionality that we design in our solution, and you'll see how. In real life, it may be one person deciding on all of that, maybe 3 different persons, maybe even a group. So what's the buyer persona is about? It's kind of similar, so we'll decide to roll out this later. We have it already built, we can release that, but we'll decide to do it later. Or we want to change the pricing model of our solution. So we think that our personas, after we define them, buyer personas, they will make decisions based on this set of their needs and factors. So we will completely change maybe even the architecture of the product or solution to afford to deliver different parts to different audiences so that we get higher revenue from that. It is used also as a thinking process. So if we are if we have conversations as business analysts with marketing people, with the sales people, with the product management people, then we use these personas to justify some solution. Why we build this part in this specific way, why we are not releasing this functionality right now, why we will never build something, because maybe it will be nice for end users, but buyer personas will not really consider that, and it's really important. It impacts a lot of things that you're doing. Now the other personas, just a few minutes, since maybe I hope you will be exploring this topic after the conference, so you'll have some small guidance from me. Personas may be used for stakeholders. If you have a really large amount of stakeholders, you're working on enterprise solution for a company, maybe you have, I don't know, 20, 50 people, you may use small profiles to represent them in your thinking or in your documentation. It's really just a free format description that helps you to impersonate. You don't want to mention real names. It may be sensitive, it may be political. So you want to design a persona for your stakeholders, maybe 2-3 personas that you will use in your statements that this will not work because this persona may not like it. But again, it's about stakeholders and internal communication. Sales personas may be using if you're working on a larger solution that is being distributed through multiple channels, and there are many people actually selling that, and you want to represent the needs of your partners who will be reselling your solution, then you can use sales personas. Again, it's kind of a part buyer persona, part free form, you decide, but it helps you to have discussions internally in your company why we are building this maybe set of controls in your solution, why we are not releasing something, because our partners that will be distributing it, maybe they want to see it in a different way, and this is how you have this conversation. In marketing personas, it's an, I would call it old school approach, when we segment people into audiences like older than this age or younger than this age. You may use this if you have a very strong marketing team influence and they really bother you to include this. So you may use some, I would call this marketing personas, but nowadays it doesn't matter anymore. If you have the power of data that you have right now, if you can segment people by their specific needs, different analytics, then you don't want to use that because you will miss matching their needs more precisely. But you will notice a lot of materials about marketing personas, demographics, segmenting that. I just want to warn you to avoid that. This is not working anymore as well as it was maybe 30 years ago, and no tools existed to do this like we do it now. Now, how to use this whole thing, just as a summary. So for user personas, you use them mostly for developing the solution in use cases, user stories, in development communication, working with user experience engineers to define the interaction with the product. For buyer personas, it's for considering the buying process. You actually can go deeper here, but I'm limited in time, so you can build the buyer journey, how they come to your product, and nowadays, you know this by yourself. When you made the decision to purchase something, you already explored everything before that, right? You have read articles, you have explored, you Googled about that solution, you asked your friends, and when you come to buying something, you already know maybe 80% of information that you would be normally 10 years ago learning with some salesperson. Now you know this already, and how this whole buying process is built, how your persona fits into each stage. This is how can you go deeper with buyer personas. You can position your product differently. You can decide on changing your product roadmap or solution roadmap, and when you want to launch and which parts you want to launch at which stage. And the common thing for all of them is thinking process, deciding on trade-offs, saying no for different parts, different functionality at all levels, and finding the gaps that you have. And just a few things to follow. First, it's a never-ending process. It's an ideal example that will never come to an end. Personas are being refined all the time for your product. You need to have data to start and then move forward, but they will never be 100% complete. You will need to change them on the way. You need to have only 3 goals per persona. You don't need to end with a situation when it's too complicated. Keep it simple. Just 3 goals that the person wants to achieve is enough. Maybe 2 goals is also fine. Now, you want to describe behavior patterns, how the person behaves. There's a good example that if a very millionaire may run into McDonald's to buy a burger for his nephew that was riding with him in the car, and he buys this burger because it's his pattern. He saves time, maybe he wants to please the kid. He doesn't buy it because he has this amount of money. And he wants to avoid describing attributes. If someone has a large amount of money, it doesn't really mean that this person will make some decision. It really helps you just a little bit, but you want to describe behavior patterns. Why this person will do this? Because there were some needs, some pain points that this person was solving. You want to have a very small amount of personas, manageable amount. 2 personas, maybe 3, not more. You can go deeper, but only if you are really a user experience expert. So you may build like focal personas, you may build personas that you think will not be using your product, but will not go there for now. And personas are not market segments. Just one example. So on the plane, the system that you are interacting on the plane, watching videos, listening music, is being built for a generic persona without skills for computer interaction. But who's paying the most for an airplane? It's the business class, right? But if you will design the solution for business class, only business class will be able to use it. Other people, they will not be educated to use it. So the market segments would be business class and economy class, but persona, it will be a generic person trying to have more enjoyable time in the plane. So this is different. Now, personas are not stereotypes. Remember the wizard from the beginning? You want to avoid that. You want to have personas that will be representing some part of your real audience, but all of those cliches and stereotypes that you may know about nationality, about some specific group of people, you want to avoid that. Otherwise, you will really not extract the most value from using personas. And personas do not fit the same domain, which means if you have used personas in the past, and now you have a new solution, a new product, and you cannot copy and paste your persona. You have to design it from the ground up, from the start, from new data, for each and every solution, for each and every domain. They are not really reusable. Otherwise, you will just fall into this assumptions fallacy that you make assumptions for a new domain, new group, new solution, and you will pay for that assumption in the end if it will not really meet the market needs. And the last part, which I think I already talked through, don't be this guy. Always use real data. And very, very important part. Who wants to be the voice of the customer in this audience? Raise your hand. Not all of you. So, how to really get there? It's quite simple. I'll show you one small Dilbert comics. So, well, you can read it yourself. Just make sure that when you get the data, you get the data from not from the office, not sitting talking to your colleagues, but actually going out, talking to real people as much as possible. I know we are all lazy. It's like not comfortable to do that, but you have to work hard. You really have to extract as much data as possible to have the successful solution being built, a product that really meets the what you see in the market. Otherwise, you will be, I think this guy on the second one, it's blind following the blind, and you will pay for that. Your company will pay for that. It will be expensive to change. It may be just a total failure. You know that from 1,000 companies, startups, and solutions, you know which is the amount that fails right now in 2018? It's 9,980. Only 20 succeed, more or less. It was 1 in 10 20 years ago. It's like 0.2% today. So many people fail. You don't want to be those people. Talk to real users. And this is what you need to do. You need to stand up, go to the market, talk to real people, call them, phone them, use maybe video chats, or there are many ways to do that, but don't assume that you will be sitting in the office designing buyer personas or user personas and you will be successful with that. So that's it from me, and I think we can have a few questions. Do we have questions?
I just wanted to find out your view. What do you think is the best one to use between the empathy map canvas and the user persona, and also when to use which?
I think they're both valuable tools. I think you can use empathy canvas to actually build a better persona. So I can't really tell you that one is better than the other. When to use both? Well, I think that you always want to build user personas if you have like a large audience using your product all the time. It may be a company, it may be a mass market. Empathy map, it's from my perspective, it's just to be more precise in those personas. I think you can also try to use empathy map for buyer personas, because you want to define how they are influenced from the outside world, how they are influenced by you, how they are influenced by competitors. So I think it's all used in parallel. Other questions?
Any questions?
If no, then thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.